Hello, everybody. My name's Stuart, and I'm going to thank you in advance for your time today and listening to my webinar, which is around body-worn cameras. Now, I really want to use this session as more of a thought provoker. It's not just about product. I'll talk briefly about product, but what I really want to go through is to look at the use cases of body-worn cameras, because there are more and more cameras coming onto the market, and we'll look at the reasons for that in a moment. But when people look at the traditional way a body-worn camera is used, I think probably this sums it up. It is a screenshot from one of our systems, and you see there what looks like a police person walking in a park. There is somebody very threatening, and that is, to me, the first thing that springs to mind with body-worn cameras. Law enforcement walking by themselves or in pairs. Somebody is, shall we say, acting inappropriately, and this needs to be captured. And perhaps you can see there also the GPS location. So perhaps this is also used to send backup, because it is a quick way to, shall we say, give assistance, see where the person is, and therefore deploy additional people or whatever is required based on the live video that's coming through. That's the initial thought. That's the traditional view. But I want to actually step away from that, if I may, to expand the use cases. And that's where I'm going to spend my time today. But before I do that, just let's have a little look at some of the background to body-worn cameras. Now, this is a growing market, and I believe that some of that growing market will be in law enforcement, for sure, but equally it will be outside of law enforcement. It will be in areas that are what we would not consider as traditional body-worn camera customers or vertical markets. And that, I think, will be the key point to my presentation today, because it's with talking with customers, with looking at our products and where they are being sort of deployed into. It's becoming part of a solution. It's not just about a camera on a person streaming or recording. It's about augmenting existing systems to move to this single pane of glass philosophy. And what I mean by that is not just access, not just video, not just intrusion or fire, building management systems. It's starting to bring everything in one screen to an operator to deliver this situational awareness. And I think those are the two key words of the whole presentation today: situational awareness. And a body-worn camera brings this unique element to situational awareness, because reality is it's a camera without wires. It's barrier-free. It moves with you. And therefore, the application for that is more extensive than just, let's say, for security services or somebody of that nature. So that's where we're going to spend most of our time. But before I do, let me just introduce you to our camera, which we launched probably, I don't know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago. And as you can see, there it is. Now, I'm not going to read down the list because you can see it. You don't need to read that from me to you. However, what this is about is providing this situational awareness, giving the quality of images, giving the capability of things like real-time recording, also streaming, because streaming is important, because as you'll see when we go through the presentation, there are different use cases for people who are static, for people who are moving around. So the flexibility to stream over Wi-Fi or cellular is important. Also things like IR, so I can do, not just restricted to daytime and things of this nature. So the camera itself is very diverse in its application, and it's the applications we're going to look at now. So when I was putting this presentation together, I looked at how people would use cameras, how customers have already talked to me about how they want to use them, and we'll bring some of those to the fore in a moment. And I look at it in its lowest common denominator. That's how I prefer to view situations and products and use cases, because I think that's the easiest way to get to the basics and then build on how it is best used for the customers, the end users. So we have people who are what I would call static. So they perhaps are in a specific department or room even within a building. And we have the traditional thought of people who are more mobile. And the camera sits happily with both types of user, because the things like the GPS, the barrier-free, the wire-free, benefits the people who are moving about, such as security forces or security guards, as an example. But equally, for both sets of people, the fact that I can generate alarms, I can use the camera images to collaborate statements, I can use the actual camera as a deterrent, because I do see them as, let's say, an attitude adjustment device, because somebody who is potentially being aggressive can see that they are going to be filmed, and that can actually calm down a situation. I have the capability to record on demand or permanently. So all of these facilities, and to give me management information, which I think is very important, which we will look at in a moment, are situations to consider when looking at the deployment of such mobile devices, because they will bring and augment existing systems and give that situational awareness from a unique perspective. So let's have a look here. Let's go for vertical market, a hospital as such. Now, hopefully you don't spend your time in A&E departments, but usually when people are in there, it's not for a good reason. And emotions become very high or fractured because either somebody is in pain or a loved one is in pain, and perhaps they're not getting the attention that they think they should immediately, because there is somebody higher up the priority list that needs attention first. So that can mean that even the most placid of people become aggressive. They display behavior that later they may regret, but at that time, that behavior to them seems appropriate to get what they want. Now, if you think in a hospital environment, yes, you have a lot of people. Yes, you have these high emotions. And this means that the people on the front line, the people staffing reception or doing the triaging, even the porters, the nurses, whoever it is, can bear the wrath of somebody whose behavior goes beyond being forceful to abusive, aggressive, violent, and so on. Now, those people at the front line is a prime example of a use case, not for security reasons, but to be having a camera wearing them, or even the camera just on the desk, as the recording information to later corroborate evidence, because you get into the situation where people say, no, I wasn't like that, and yes, you were. And if this ever, because of their behavior, is so abusive or violent, goes to court or whatever, there needs to be evidence. Now, a camera being worn by a person gives a very unique perspective. Now, in all the situations I'm going to be talking about, there are cameras everywhere. But having a camera on yourself means I'm going to give this first-hand evidence. It can corroborate my statements. And I've also got the capability to record the audio as well. And the fact is, if you look around an A&E, you have cameras placed in many situations, but they don't offer this unique perspective that a camera worn here does. So let's look at another example. And this example, to me, is one that is probably quite left field. But during a recent trade show that we had, this use case was the one that most customers, were asking about. And it was a case of, particularly in critical infrastructure, I want to know that my staff are performing the duties within the health and safety rules, let's say, because you go on site, people will be trained for health and safety, or they must, tick the list, sign a document, whatever it is, wear the appropriate clothing. But to check there is compliance, and particularly where I'm using this as, you can see it's a building site, or some of the companies I was talking to were gas installations, then to have later the evidence or the management information to actually replay recordings, see if there has been an accident, what the perspective was of the wearers and the people around the accident. It gives a unique insight. Now, for things like that, high resolution, long durations of recording, so battery life of 12 hours, I think, these things are very important in all of this. But key staff in such situations, in the critical infrastructure, as I mentioned, these cameras will give this unique perspective again. It goes back to always unique perspective and situational awareness, whichever it is, because accidents do happen, or people do not follow compliance, or shortcuts. And if we go back a couple of slides a moment, this management information is encompassed within the health and safety, because the video that is generated, either live or replayed through recording, can give that unique perspective, that situational awareness. But it's the capability of what that information can be used for, because that is what we do in this industry. We generate information and we consume that information. And one of the ways to consume and leverage this unique capability of perspective is to say, all right, there was an accident. I've got images of this. I can use that for training. It is a unique perspective that a normally deployed camera wouldn't give. So I can use that for training. I can use that to see if my health and safety policies and processes needs to change. And that's the benefit of this. Not only am I looking to see if my staff are doing what they should be doing from a training perspective, from a compliance, but also using that information to then better what I do and better the information given to people. Equally, things like, and probably something that's more traditional, I'm going to use here things like campuses and things of this nature. Now, ultimately, if we think we have leisure, we have campuses, we have vertical markets of this description, people are moving around. People in, let's use clubs for the moment, they are, shall we say, having a good time. They are perhaps having one too many beverages, things of this nature. Equally, this can happen on campus. And in fact, I think I have even a better slide here looking at this. So you can see there a person potentially drunk. There's the beer to prove it. And you have guards or security staff or whomever patrolling these areas. And they're there to offer, let's say, assistance, to offer guidance and advice. And if you're dealing with, let's say, somebody who's potentially drunk, then their recollection of an event and reality can sometimes be very different. And it happens very often that, shall we say, guards, mobile guards, security staff are accused of improper activity by somebody who, shall we say, wasn't very coherent at the time. Equally, staff who are patrolling an area can be very isolated, particularly if it's in the evenings or in areas where there are very few people. And also there is no guarantee that people are doing what they are paid to do. So using the campus as the example, there are guards or security staff who will, part of their job, move around. Part of their job is to check certain areas, provide assistance. And as the management of the campus or the university or whatever it is, I need to know that people are doing their functions because that is part of my security operation. But equally, if somebody is accused, which is a very strong word, of inappropriate behavior because somebody who had passed out in the middle of the sports field, it remembers the situation differently, then again, things like a body-worn camera provide this evidence, this corroboration of statements. But equally, and leveraging things like GPS, then I have the capability to, at a moment's notice, call for backup just by pushing the button, create an event in the system, and we'll see an example of that in a moment. I have the security to know in my own mind that I'm not being accused, or if I am accused of something that I didn't do, something inappropriate behavior, then I have the evidence that says, no, I'm sorry, you remembered that wrongly, possibly because you had one too many beverages, and so on. So again, probably not a traditional way of looking at use of a camera, but having this unique view also means that I can see if a guard who is patrolling, doing a tour of a site, checking, the doors are closed, windows are closed, and so on. I have the, for want of a better phrase, the evidence that they have done this. So I can always go back and check that if there was a breach of security, then the guard had done their job correctly. It's all about culpability. And this is the sort of summary. So I think probably here we've mentioned already things like training and mitigating risk, compliance with things like health and safety gives me this management information. And the real thing here is consuming the data that a camera will give live and recorded. And to give you a good example of that, let's just have a look here. Now, this is a trade show we were at Intersec a few weeks ago. And what you're looking at here is not body-worn cameras. These are just static cameras. There's AI running on them. That's why you can see boxes around them. But what to show you here is the capability about this situational awareness. So if I just start the video and, oh, it hasn't started. Let's just do a little, there we go. Nope. I don't know if you saw that pop up. And that was on response to two people walking towards me, and I pushed the button to say, help. So this is a good example of where I can use the camera for people who are walking remote, they're feeling isolated, and they push the button, pop up on the guard screen, I get the GPS, and then ultimately I can deploy additional staff to that area. I can see what's happening live, as you saw, who was Lee and Laura walking towards me. And this is all, again, down to this situational awareness, because this is what ultimately a mobile camera is going to do. Now, I think the use cases are basically endless. But certainly as technology has moved forward, certainly as we are leveraging things like 12 hours of constant recording if needs be at 1080p, so high definition, so I get all of that good perspective, good information, the capability to stream economically over Wi-Fi and also LTE, so cellular, to be able to review video and search it in my VMS as I would do any video. And I think that's key as well, because the easier you make the transition from the camera to the recorder and then the reviewing, then the better it is for everyone. And to have this record capability, this search capability, and this live streaming capability with GPS as well, gives me, this new way to generate and consume data that is going to benefit me, just stepping outside of the security element, let's say the police or so forth, into areas where I can use the information for management, training, health and safety, and so on. And that, thank you, concludes my presentation.